Stagnant wages and massive increases in the cost of just about everything. It's Friday at the Labor Network. I'm Mark Harrison. WTF is next. Writing in the Atlantic magazine, Annie Lowrey crafts a compelling story about how the red-hot economy has bled most Americans dry. In the early 2010s, unemployment stood around 10%. It has now been hovering around 3.5% for quite a while. But pretty much anyone who wants to work can. Absent an education, though, or experience, or a marketable skill, those people will be working for close to or at minimum wage. Wages have increased dramatically over the course of the last decade for high-income earners, yet the vast majority of workers have been left behind. And in what Ms. Lowrey calls the great affordability crisis, it's not so much the lack of increasing wages that have decimated families, but the cost of nearly everything they need to survive. The cost of affording a house is now only a pipe dream for most Americans. Upfront closing costs can now easily run over $100,000 in many locations. And the cost of a median homes in most expensive areas on both of the coasts is well over $1 million. And the idea of qualifying for a mortgage of that amount is almost impossible for most people. And even in areas of the country that might be considered more affordable, most homes are still out of reach for most people. The fact is that home prices are rising faster than wages in 80% of the American metro regions. And as to the over 20% of the country that they're not, well, good luck finding work that pays more than $7.25 an hour. So what is a person or a family to do if they can't afford a house? Well, they rent. And the story there, however, is much the same, with the costs of rents rising faster than wages for the last 20 years. Add to this the story that much of a family's wealth creation is tied to home ownership. And the story only gets worse as those with homes can sell and use the money in retirement or can even help finance their children's education, while those who can barely afford to rent are left with nothing in old age. But the crisis doesn't end with homes. Medical expenses continue to increase dramatically. And whether it be insurance or out-of-pocket deductibles, many people live one serious illness or accident from financial ruin. And 2/3 of all personal bankruptcies stem from a medical crisis in the family. And while we Americans pay fully twice as much for health care as citizens of other wealthy countries, our medical outcomes are no better. We pay twice as much and get the same results. Student loans. Student loan debt and the cost of college is a burden that is shaking families to the core, as parents who once felt a certain ability to afford college for their children watched their ability to save vanish, and the cost of college passed them by like they were standing still, leaving many parents racked with guilt and stealing from their own retirements to fund an education, only to become burdens on these same children later in life because their retirement savings are gone. And child care costs have risen 2,000% in the past 40 years. How can a young working couple, continue to work and continue to save under those conditions? Well, most can't. Housing, renting, medical care, child care, college are all now entirely out of reach for a middle class who once built this country into what it is and haven't had a raise in 50 years. The saddest part about this crisis is that it is policy driven by inept and scared elected officials who are loath to do the right thing in Washington for their constituents. Elected officials who are afraid to go against the wishes of their wealthy donors. And many of these problems could be fixed through responsible actions by our leaders, but they won't be as long as they fear wealthy campaign contributors more than they fear you throwing them out of office. Now, there's an election for the entire U.S. House of Representatives, for 1/3 of the U.S. Senate, and for the incumbent president coming this November. What will you do? I'm Mark Harrison. Have a good week, everyone.